Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Happy Monday to you. Hopefully you had a great weekend. Welcome to Let's Talk Tropics right here on Acadiana Weather Today. Things relatively quiet over the weekend. When we left you on Friday, we were talking about some of the computer models going out a couple of weeks. We're starting to get a little more active, particularly after the Labor Day weekend, which is highly unusual because this is the time of the year where we normally have several tropical systems that are out there, and things have been very, very quiet, which is actually really good news because things could be a lot different as we have seen in years past. So hopefully we can keep things nice and quiet over the next several weeks before we get toward the end of the hurricane season. Let's really quick look at what we've got going on outside across Acadiana. Temperature at 90 with a mix of sun and clouds. That heat index is already at 99 degrees as those dew points have climbed quite a bit over the weekend. Some of you may have gotten a couple of isolated showers yesterday, and I think a few more of you will get some today. We'll take a little break from the rain, I think, tomorrow, and then it'll pick up again by the middle part of the week. As far as our traffic cameras and kind of glancing at the skies here, we've got a mix of sun and clouds, but not seeing any rain, at least on the interstate system here within the Lafayette region and Lafayette, Acadia, and into St. Martin parishes. But we are seeing some scattered showers and thunderstorms. Most of this has been in the offshore waters, but there are a few scattered storms that are starting to fire up here over parts of Vermilion Parish. Some of this is going to cross just south of that LA 14 corridor into Cameron. Got a heavy downpour just to the west of Big Lake, and then we've got a couple of isolated showers starting to develop over parts of Calcasieu Parish. Eastern sections of Acadiana not seeing quite as much. I'll go ahead and pull up the Hammond radar in here as well. There are some coastal showers and thunderstorms from Grand Isle down to the coast of Terrebonne Parish, and I wouldn't be surprised to see some of this working its way into the southern parts of Acadiana, but I would say that generally along and south of I-10 has the best chance for rain, and if you live north of I-10, especially east of I-49, you probably won't see a whole lot of rain out there today. So let's go ahead and get into some of our satellite images and what has been causing the recent showers yesterday and today is a bit of an upper trough that's been moving westward across the Gulf of Mexico. We actually started talking about this trough a little over a week ago. I think a week ago this past Friday we started talking about this as we were really trying to look for any tropical weather that could possibly fire up. And one of the models, I believe it was the Icon model, again, this is going back probably maybe about 11 or 12 days, where the frontal boundary that brought us that little bit of dry air last week would generate a low pressure area, and there's possibility sometimes you get frontal boundaries that can develop a tropical system. Icon was predicting something. It ended up being this upper trough, but it is throwing some extra moisture in our direction, and even though the low is going to go ahead and move off to the west into Texas, we're still going to get an influence from some deeper tropical moisture coming in from the south. So even though tomorrow I think we'll kind of back off on the rain chances a little bit, as we go into Wednesday and Thursday, those rain chances will pick up once again. As far as the winds and seas in the offshore waters, if you're out there working today, you're probably seeing a mix of sun and clouds with some scattered rains around, probably some beautiful skies out there in the Gulf of Mexico. Generally, our seas are going to be running about 1 to 3 feet, some 2 to 4 foot seas in some areas off the southeastern Louisiana coast, and of course winds and seas will be higher around thunderstorms as we go through the day today. So let's go on the search and see if we've got anything brewing out there. We've got another upper trough that is kind of moving across the western part of the Caribbean Sea, right about in here, and that's going to go ahead and drift off toward the west. It's going to continue to bring some showers and thunderstorms over portions of Central America, and you can kind of see that counterclockwise rotation there around that upper trough that's kind of right in here, so you get a little bit more of a flow that comes around like this, and you got some bigger thunderstorms that are there over the southern part of the Caribbean Sea. You got another little surface low that's kind of spinning right there, but that's not anything to worry about, at least for right now. Even though that is at the surface, we're not seeing any convection developing around that. And as we look out at the tropical Atlantic, we've got a couple of waves that are out here, one about right there and one about right there. So the two of those waves again, are not showing any signs of organization. You still got a pretty big ridge of high pressure that's out here in the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico. So anything that develops out in the Atlantic most likely would kind of come in this direction and turn away from our region. So we're going to look at some of the models. And again, last week, some of the models were showing some increased activity, especially with some of these tropical waves coming off of the African coast. But I will tell you right now that the models have really started to back off a lot on any development out here. But with that said, it doesn't mean that we're not going to see anything for the next 10 to 14 days. I think for the next week, we're probably in good shape. Some of that has to do with the wind shear, especially over the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf wind shear is fairly moderate over here, and that's part of that upper trough that's moving off toward the west. But there's some decent conditions out here in the development zone over the central and western part of the Atlantic. The unfortunate part is the waves just don't seem to be able to grasp hold of anything because there's still a lot of Saharan dust out in the middle part of the Atlantic, and also there's a lot of dry air out there. But looking at the next 2 weeks here, I want you to notice that the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea does turn a lot more green as we go into the first few days of September. Even though we're not seeing anything organized really showing up on the models, just the increase of moisture may be a hint that we're going to be seeing some activity coming up. And again, I wouldn't be surprised to see that since we are getting into the peak of the hurricane season, and those water temperatures are maxing out in the 30 to 31 degrees Celsius range, which is about 86 to 88 degrees. That's over the Gulf of Mexico and the western part of the Caribbean. And those very warm waters, since they really haven't been disturbed a whole lot this year, those warm waters run very, very deep. So if we were to get a tropical system with the right atmospheric conditions to move over some of these areas, perhaps over the Caribbean Sea or getting into the Gulf of Mexico, particularly the Caribbean Sea and the central part of the Gulf of Mexico and right over here in the western Atlantic, we could really see something go from a minor tropical depression or tropical storm and whip up into a category 2 or 3 hurricane in a very short period of time. That can also happen out here too, where the tropical cyclone heat potential is quite high as well. But according to the National Hurricane Center, at least for the next week, things are appearing to stay fairly quiet. So we're going to go through the model run suite here, and we're going to go out 10 days again. We'll start out with the GFS, and the GFS was actually hinting at a couple of lows, maybe one over the Caribbean and one over the Gulf of Mexico when I left you last week on Friday. But as you can see here, really the only game in town right at the very end of this forecast loop, there's a little bit of a low pressure area perhaps developing out here in the Atlantic Ocean, but locally we're really just not seeing a whole lot developing according to the GFS. Now remember, the GFS goes out 16 days and I'm just showing you the first 10, but the earlier models that ran this morning going out to 16 days still wasn't showing any tropical development. The Euro model is showing a lot of increased moisture, very much like I was showing on that moisture profile over parts of the Caribbean as well as the Gulf of Mexico. But there's not really any organization being shown in here. Some of the waves and more moisture out here over the Atlantic Ocean, you might get a couple of waves that might develop out there. But the Euro model is also running fairly quiet compared to what we would normally see for this time of the year. So we'll move on to the Canadian. Again, the Canadian, this one just hot off the presses. This one also goes out 10 days. And you got that big ridge of high pressure that's out here in the Atlantic Ocean, so everything would kind of drift off toward the west like that, and then maybe make more of a turn in that direction if it were moving north of the Leeward and Windward Islands. But as I said, there really isn't anything showing up here over the next 10 days. Maybe a little bit of a trough right there that could possibly push into the Bahamas about 9 or 10 days from now, but nothing that looks real significant. And as I was showing you on Friday, I kind of went through model run to model run to model run to see some consistency, and there just isn't a lot out there. And that is really good news, because that means that we probably will be staying quiet at least for the next week, but going into the following week might be a little bit different as we get closer to the peak of the hurricane season. And finally, we'll just finish up here with the Icon model. And believe it or not, the Icon model only goes out 7 days. Even though there's not much showing up out there, I will show you here a week from today that the Icon icon is the only one that's really showing anything. Maybe a little bit of a low pressure area, something weak over the western part of the Gulf of Mexico, and perhaps something that could have the potential of getting stronger here over the northern Leeward Islands. I believe kind of like what the Canadian model was showing, with maybe some development in this particular area. Perhaps the Canadian model might be picking up on this as the same as the icon. So again, we'll just kind of have to wait and see. But I do want to let everybody know, even though things have been very, very quiet, it doesn't mean that things can turn around very quickly. I'm not saying that we're going to all of a sudden get 10 named storms like we did in September of 2020, but I think there's going to be more action out there. And one of the things I do want to remind you of as well is it really only takes one system to really mess up your hurricane season completely. And a good example is an anniversary that we're looking back at today. Hurricane Andrew made landfall today back in 1992. So 32 years ago, we had Hurricane Andrew, which was a devastating Category 5 hurricane when it crossed over the southern tip of Florida, and then still managed to make landfall just southwest of Morgan City as a Category 3 hurricane here in South Louisiana. And the reason why I say don't let your guard down is Andrew. That's the A name. That's the first name on the list. How long has it been since we have not had a tropical system with a name come until the end of August? Usually you've got several tropical systems that happen. So even in 1992, which was one of the quietest hurricane seasons of all time, for the longest time before Katrina and Rita and Laura and Ida and Ian, all of those storms came along, Hurricane Andrew in the 1992 season was the record season when it came to the impact on the United States. And here in Louisiana alone, Hurricane Andrew causing over $1.5 billion worth of damage. So again, it was a very significant hurricane. Those of you who live in St. Mary and Terrebonne and into Iberia and even St. Martin parishes, here in Lafayette, we took a pretty good hit from Hurricane Andrew, but the bulk of the action was just to the southeast and east of us. So Hurricane Andrew, a big anniversary here. And of course, this is the week that we've got a whole bunch of other anniversaries that are going to be coming up, and we'll talk more about that later this week. But just a reminder, during the month of September, you do have quite a bit of real estate that's open for business for tropical systems to develop. And of course, we are getting closer and closer to the peak of the hurricane season, which is September the 10th. And during that peak here, basically from about the mid part of August to about the mid part of September, about 80% of all tropical systems happen during this period of time. So we've still got some wiggle room to get a few more storms to develop here over the next several weeks. So before I leave you, again, I know for most of you that have been on watching this show for weeks have seen this graphic a million times, but I'm going to keep throwing it up there because these are the things that you can take care of right now. And they're very quick things that you can do, and it will give you so much extra time if indeed a tropical storm or hurricane threatens our area. If you have all of these things in place, it's going to make your life a lot easier. So if you're out and about, just pick up some extra batteries, maybe grab a cheap flashlight, water, non-perishable food. Check out your first aid kit, make sure it's stocked up, see how much prescription medicine you have, where you're going to get prescription medicine in case you have to leave or in case a tropical system happens and we're not able to get our medicines locally. Personal hygiene, house cleaners, and take all of your important IDs, insurance, and IDs. Make sure you pack those in a place where you can grab and go, but you can also take a lot of pictures of those and save them as digital. Have a basic tool set, lots of entertainment for the kids, and everything you need for your pets. And these are things, again, that you can do right now where you're not fighting the crowds, and all of these items are readily available in our local store. So take care of those things as quickly as possible. I know this will save you a lot of time later on, and you will thank me later, especially if we get something to come along. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. I know it's another quiet day, but another quiet day gets us closer to the end of hurricane season. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on those notifications too, so you know when Let's Talk Tropics starts live, and also when Acadiana Weather Today hits on YouTube every weekday morning at about 7:30. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you on Tuesday.